I'm going to review how to make a histogram on your TI84 or 83 calculator. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that your data is in the calculator. So we had worked on a list of diabetes data, had 548 data items. I want to make sure it's in there. I go second, and above the stat button is a blue that says list. So I press list, and well, DIABP, that's not it. That's a blood pressure list I have. You have to kind of keep track of your lists. But DIABS is the list that I was looking for. So I know that the data is in there. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I get it in a list that I can work with in my stat function. So I'm going to push stat, and I'm going to push edit. And usually you'll have lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are your default lists. I want to add a list with the diabetes data. So I'm going up and I'm going to highlight L1. And then above the delete button it says INS, insert. So I'm going to go second, insert, and I inserted a brand new blank column. And at the bottom here, you can see it's asking me, well, what is the name? Well, it doesn't have a name yet, and I want to name this the same as the list that I have already in my calculator. So I'm going to go second, list, and I'm going to go down to the diabetes one. Oops, I went too far. And I'm going to hit enter. So the name is showing up there, and now I hit enter again, and now I can see that I have this list here with all of my data in it. One thing you can notice is if I now go down to a data item, you see it says on the very bottom, diabs, and then parentheses 1, and then 62. It's telling me that in the diabs list, the diabetes list, the first item in the diabetes list is the number 62. So I go down to the second one. Well, the second one is 27, and the third one is 41. This is just kind of something so you know how to read what the calculator is saying. So I'd like to make a histogram. And if you remember when you were graphing in Algebra 2 or Pre-Calculus, if you push the y equals button, you might have a formula in there, parentheses x minus 25 squared. Okay, that's in there. And if I graph that, I would go zoom 6, and I have something else there now. I'm going to go and turn that on. See how this is a histogram over here, something that I'm going to show you how to make. But if something like that happens, a histogram is a statistical plot. So if I went to my y equals, if you see way up here at the top it says plot 1 and it's highlighted, just go up to plot 1, hit enter, and then that toggles it off. So now it's not going to be on anymore. I have to get to the right spot. Yeah. Now it's not going to be on anymore and it won't interfere. So if I wanted to graph this, I would go zoom 6, and nothing's going to show up because really that graph is like way over here off of the chart. How I find that is a different story. But what you want to make sure when you're making a statistical graph is when you go y equals, anything in your y 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through 10, you have to clear it. It has to be clean. We don't want anything there. But that y equals button is what we use to make graphs. And if you'll notice, right above the y equals button, it says in blue stat plot, because that's what we're going to do. We want to plot some statistical charts. So I'm going to go second, stat plot. And I'm given a bunch of choices here. Well, the first thing I want to do is make sure I don't have any old ones sitting in there that are going to conflict unless I want them on there. And I'm going to press number 4, which says plots off, and I'm going to press enter, and it's going to say done. So all of those plots are now off. So now I'm going to go back, because I do want to make a statistical graph. I'm going to go second, stat plot. And I'm just going to use plot 1. I can see that they're all off. See, off, off, off. But I'm going to use plot 1 to make my graph. So I can either hit enter or I can press the number 1. And this is my plot number 1, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on. All right, so once I have the stat plot on, I have to decide what type of a plot I want, and I'm given 6 choices here. This is a scatter plot. I don't know what that one is. This is a histogram. This is a box plot. That's another kind of a box plot, and I think that's a residual plot, but I'm not positive. At any rate, we want a histogram. So I'm going to go down to the type, and if I want to get like down here to one of these second row ones, I can't press the down button again. That takes me to the X list. So I have to just kind of scroll across using my sideways button. And now I can see that the histogram is highlighted, so I'm going to press enter, and that tells me it's a histogram. Well, a histogram is a one variable chart. So it's asking me what's my variable, and that's in the X list. Well, this one says the variable is L1, and if I just type some data into L1, that would have been where it is, but we're using the diabetes list. So I'm going to go down to the X list, and instead of L1, I mean, I could go clear, I don't really have to, but I'm going to go second list, and I want the diabetes list, not the DIABP, I want the DIABS. And I press enter, and that's my X list. And then I press down to the frequency. When I'm entering raw data like I am with the diabetes list, I want the frequency to be 1. We can change the frequency another time in another lesson. So I want to do a chart. I'm going to go zoom, and for some reason, I can never figure out why, this stuff here pops up at the very bottom. And when it does, it kind of freezes my ability to make a graph. But it's easy to get around it. Just go second, quit, and go back to your main page. All the stuff that you stored in your stat plot is already there. So to get a stat graph, you go zoom, and if I scroll all the way down here, you'll see that 9 says zoom stat. So I could just go zoom 9, and what do you know? I have a histogram. The calculator automatically makes settings so that the histogram will kind of look okay. But I don't usually like their settings because it's a calculator and it doesn't really know what it is I'm trying to accomplish. So, for example, if I want to see what each of these bins is, I'm going to push the trace button. So my bin number 1 there says that goes from 1 to 9.7, and there's 1 to 9.7, and there's 33 elements in that bin. Well, if I was to draw this, and then the next one, I'll go the next one over, goes from 9.7 to 18.4. And the next one goes from 18.4 to 27.1. So if I was to draw this on a separate piece of graph paper, which you are going to have to do, I would be starting at 1, I would go into 9.7, then I'd be going to 18.4, then I'd be going to 27.1. I couldn't even tell what it was by looking. These are not human-friendly numbers. Humans have 5 fingers and 5 toes. That's a hand, by the way. 5 fingers on each hand. We like to think in 5s and 10s. We like to think in numbers that are kind of rounded. So this whole thing of, what are these? So these are 8.7 size bins. These are not human, and you need to make them human. And the way you do that is you go into the window right there. And the bin size is determined by the X scale. So right here, X scale determines the bin size. Now one nice thing about the calculator doing it for you is it says 8.7, and it makes a nice histogram. So that's telling me that I should maybe try a bin size of 5 or a bin size of 10, like right around 8.7. So I'm going to try a bin size of 5. I'm going to go, now I don't want to go zoom 9 again, because if I go zoom 9, that just has the calculator recalculate the whole thing all over again. I'm going to go graph. And there's the histogram. Now, again, I have a lot of empty space up here at the top, and a lot of empty space down here at the bottom. So I might want to change that a little bit. So I'd like to kind of extend it so that it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to go back to my window, and I'm going to make my y maximum. My y minimum does not have to be a negative number because I'm not going to have any negative counts. It's nice to have a little bit of blank space underneath there so that you can see your data when you do the trace. So I'm just going to say like -10. And my y maximum, well, the calculator had given me 119 when my bin size was 8.7. So when my bin size was 8.7, it had to take me up as high as 119. Well, now that I've made my bin size smaller as a 5, that means each bin is going to have less data items. So 119 isn't, I don't need to be that big. I'm just going to put in 100. And again, you can see I'm using these nice numbers. And I'm going to make my scale in tens. So now I'm going to press graph. Well, that's a really nice looking histogram. And you can see my scale, those are these little dots right here. Those are in tens. And my bin size, I'm going to go trace. My bin size, oh, this is in fives, yeah, 1 to 6. 6, oh, I made a mistake. My minimum is 1. I want it to go in 5. So back to my window. My minimum, I'm going to make it 0. Now I'm going to go graph. Change it just a tiny bit. If I go trace, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. So it's looking much nicer. Maybe I still have a little bit too much white space up at the top, so I didn't need to go up to 100. I'll change my window again. I'm going to make my X maximum, I'm going to make it 80. Whoops, 80, not 8.0. 80. And you know what? I'm going to change my X maximum again to a round number. I'm going to change it to 100. Graph it. That's a much nicer histogram. Let's say that I wanted to see, well, what does it look like if I change my bin size to 10? Now remember, I'm going to be expanding my bin size from the 8.7 to 10. It was at 119. Now that I have a larger bin, there's going to be more data items in it. So I'll probably bring my maximum up to like maybe 120. Maybe I'll change it up to 130 and see what it looks like. So, window. My X max stays at 100. That's my scale along the X axis. I'll leave my Y minimum at -10, and I'll change my Y maximum to 130. And I said I was going to change my bin size to 10, and I go graph, and I just made it perfectly. You know, the top of this one here is just at the very top, but at least I can still see it. And if I go trace, again I can see, well, this is from 0 to 10, and I have 33 items in that bin. 10 to 20, I have 22 items. So it's really kind of up to me to decide whether I like this one or the one with 5 better. Now you are going to have to put this on graph paper. So if I was going to put this on a graph, I might, I'd have my graph here and my x-axis right here are my ages, and my y-axis on a histogram is always a count. You don't really need to label it, but I'm putting it there so you can see it. And so I would say, so this is from 0 to 10. I'm going to go trace, and from 0 to 10 I have 33. So I would kind of make a line right there, and then it goes down. And then my next one is going to be 22, so I make a line right there and then go down. If you want to, I generally don't recommend this, but you could put 33 here and 22 there, so you could put the number of items and so forth all the way across till this histogram is done. But when you do it, it's very important that your axes tick marks, your axes numbers be human friendly on both the x-axis and the y-axis. If they're not human-friendly, then a human really can't read it. They won't want to even look at it. So I think that's a pretty good introduction to how to make a histogram on your TI calculator.